This is the My Campaign Coach podcast, where we talk about how to win elections. Every week, we let you hear straight from the best consultants, operatives, and candidates in the game, all for one reason, to help you win. For more information about how we can help you win, visit mycampaigncoach.com. Now, here's your host, Raj Schaefer.
Welcome to the How to Run for Office podcast from My Campaign Coach. Today we're talking to Spencer Sullivan of Lean Campaign Strategies about how to run efficient campaigns. Saving money is always something I'm a fan of doing, and there's rarely enough of it on the campaign trail. Before we start talking with Spencer, I want to point out another way to save you money on the campaign trail. At the end of July, we launched our flagship live course as a self-paced online class that includes 15 hours of video, downloads galore, and gives you access to live question and answer sessions with our team of coaches every couple of weeks, twice a month. Until the end of August, we're giving you a 25% off offer if you want to use the coupon code LAUNCH at checkout. It'll make you a better candidate and save you money every step of the way. So go to mycampaigncoach.com to check that out, and we hope to see you guys in the class. Spencer Sullivan is the CEO and founder of Lean Campaign Strategies. He began his career on the Hill working for a member of Congress, and he transitioned to the campaign trail after realizing he enjoyed the competitiveness and the fast-paced environment of campaigns. He's managed victorious top-tier federal races and targeted state races. On the campaign trail, Spencer has been involved in every aspect of managing a campaign. He's experienced in fundraising, earned media, field operations, paid voter contract polling, and get out the vote operations. He's literally done it all. Having been frequently outspit by incumbent campaigns during challenging races, Spencer has learned the importance of running a lean, efficient campaign that makes every single dollar stretch as far as possible. He specializes in challenger campaigns and has ousted more than his share of incumbents in back-to-back elections. Spencer routinely appears on television as a pundit and discusses the news of the day. He also consults for a pharmaceutical company in their guided messaging. Raised in the Northeast, Spencer is a graduate of Marymount University, where he majored in political science. He's one of 5 brothers, and he enjoys catching up with his family and rooting for his beloved Boston sports teams every chance he gets. Spencer, his wife, and their daughter Reagan live in Arlington, Virginia, and I'm not sure how he finds time to do all this stuff in his schedule because it's pretty jam-packed. And he's literally going straight from recording this interview to hopping on Fox, so he's a busy guy. But Spencer, thanks for being on the podcast with us today.
Happy to be on, Roz, and I'm looking forward to it. And what you guys do in My Campaign Coach is just wonderful, and happy to go forward.
Well, I tell you what, when I started reading more about you and saw some of your interviews at Campaign Elections Expo, I was thrilled because we look at campaigns the same way. Like you, I work in a lot of challenger races. A lot of the folks that we coach and that I've helped over the years they're the underdog, and there's never enough money. You never have as much as you hope for, and you got to make every dollar stretch as far as possible. And so, as I was listening to your interviews and reading some of the content you put out, I definitely felt like I found a kindred spirit and definitely a great fit to be here on the podcast.
More than happy, and I think that what you speak to in challenger campaigns and making sure you use those resources as efficiently and effectively as possible is spot on. I mean, it's nice. I mean, an incumbent campaign with $1 million in the bank account or a couple $100,000, but it's those challenger campaigns that really know how to stretch those dollars farther than possible. Because look, you have limited time, limited resources, and those campaigns that use those limited time and limited resources as effectively as possible are the most successful.
You're exactly right. So as we're kind of getting in, as we're working up to talking about your philosophy of lean campaigns, let's kind of start out like we do every week and talk about your background and how you got involved in politics.
Yeah, Roz, I made my first campaign. I made all the wrong mistakes in the book. It was one of the first campaigns, and we had billboards, we had yard signs, we had those stupid QR codes. It really was a terrible, terrible campaign, but it was a lot of fun. I mean, I went to bed. We lost, of course. Still very bitter about it because I feel like I've learned more from my losses than any of my wins combined.
Absolutely.
I went to bed very bitter, and I go, how could these people vote for this crook? Our opponent. How could these people vote for this guy? And I woke up the next day, and I go, wow, that war room was awesome. That 2 or 3 minutes of just straight adrenaline and having the numbers come in and all the friends and relationships you make throughout a campaign, I loved it, and I fell in love with it. It was the best job I ever had. After that was the first campaign many years ago, and ever since then, it's been campaign to campaign, state to state, and it's really been a learning process. And I was talking to someone else, another consultant, about this the other day, and I said, look, I've learned more from that one loss than any of my other wins combined. And one of the other things I learned off my first win was that I definitely hate losing more than I like winning.
I hear that. Well, I was talking to Dr. Mark Campbell, who's been a long time campaign consultant, and he was, when he was on the podcast, he talked about how one, he's in the same boat. He learned way more from his losses. I think he said that losing races makes you smart, and winning races makes you good looking and popular. which apparently I need to win more races in that case. But it's really important to learn from those, because that's where you learn what you got to do differently. It's easy to miss the lessons you should learn from a winning campaign because you won. What you did great. What's more to do, and ego gets in the way of that. But and oftentimes there's not a detailed post-mortem looking for your mistakes and how you can improve. It's too easy to lose track of those lessons there. I have yet to be on a winning campaign who did as exhaustive one of those as I thought they should, and they definitely didn't pick up as many lessons as I think they could have.
Yeah, and I think one of the dangers of winning a campaign is, especially if you want a campaign that was won because of the political environment, not because of the campaign or the candidate, that the operatives and the candidate kind of learn all the wrong lessons.
Yes.
They don't learn from the mistakes that they made. And, granted, it's nice that you won. Granted, it's nice that it made you look, better and more attractive to other folks. But, one of the things before I hire a campaign manager for one of my clients or is tell me what you've learned from your losses. Tell me what you've learned from your wins. And I'm always very wary of those operatives, of those candidates who would say, I know it all. I've won one election, I've won two elections, and it was an off year, and every Republican wins an off year, right? So it's one of those things where I want to know deep down, are you very bitter about your last election loss, and what are you going to do to improve it? Because I can tell you what, I can drive through the state of New Jersey, that election I lost, and I can't think of anything else but that one campaign. I can't think of anything else everything else I should have done differently. And it's driven me today to the point where I don't want to make those same mistakes, right? The election wins I've had, congressional targeted state legislative races I've had, I went to bed like maybe 11 o'clock that night and woke up, okay, what's next, right?
Exactly.
And kind of move forward and great. It was great to win, but being a Red Sox fan, being from the Northeast, you definitely hold on to those losses.
You guys got a long memory up there, that's for sure.
We do.
Oh man, I tell you what, the first campaign that I was involved in, and many of the folks who are listening today have heard this before, but the first campaign I was involved in was also lost. We actually lost the state house race when I was 10 years old, and we lost it by 12 votes on a recount. And my takeaway like that, it's literally one of those demons that sticks with you for decades to come. And still to this day, I learned that even myself, that as a 10-year-old, I could have found 13 people to send that lady to Austin. And every election cycle, between when the polls close and the early voting numbers come in, I go to the bathroom, I wash my face, I look in the mirror, and I ask myself, did I do everything that I could do? Mm-hmm. And I always want the answer to be yes, because I still think and feel like I did on election night back in 1996 when I was looking at that, and I knew in retrospect that I hadn't done that, and that we paid a high price because that I was the only one. There were plenty of other people that could have done more, but I don't want to feel that way, and so that really drives me every election cycle.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you reference looking yourself in the mirror and saying, did I do everything I could do, right? And I think one of those questions there is, how effectively did you use your time? How effectively did the campaign, the candidate use their time? And you really have three main resources within the campaign. You have time, you have talent, and you have treasure, right? And one of the most important to me, and I pose this question to everyone, and they tend to get it wrong at times, but my opinion is out of those three resources, time, talent, and treasure, time is the most effective. It's the most important. You can never get time back. Mm-hmm. You can't go on election night and say, only if I had more time to knock on 10 more doors, right? You can always hire more talent. You can always, make more fundraising phone calls. But on election night, you can't get that time back. So really when it comes down to me and how I approach campaigns is the most effective, the most important resource we have is time at this point. How can we use the candidate's time as effectively as possible, How can we use the staff, the volunteers' time as effectively as possible? And how can we use our treasure, our finances, within our time frame as effectively as possible at the same time?
I think that's a wonderful way to look at it. It's really the same way that I approach campaigns. You can never have too much of any of those three things. But there's only one of those that's not renewable, like you said. And so you start out by focusing on time. That's really a lot of what we focus on from our coaching side is how do we especially build systems and processes that are going to be able to run throughout the campaign, that we're going to be able to maybe put a little bit more time investment up front to build those right. But they're going to save us time every time that we attack a chore or that we go through any kind of to-do list item. And that's something that I'm a huge believer in. As you were starting to take on some of those early campaigns, you obviously learned a very stark lesson from that first one, that first loss. Tell me a little bit more about some of those that you've run since then and been involved with, and kind of some of the lessons you learned along the way as well.
Yeah, some of the lessons I've learned, I think it's very common in the campaign world. I think there's a lot to be learned from the private sector. I think there's a lot to be learned from outside the campaign industry, right? That can benefit the campaign world. For some reason, the campaign world is always, a couple of years behind what the private sector is doing, right? Whether it be micro-targeting, whether it be addressable TV, whether it be whatever you want to call it of the time. And so, early on, I wanted to take a step back and really just learn, from all different sectors of life to see how can we improve our campaign? How can we improve this process? And one of the things I found was, we always talk about at the end of a campaign cycle, where was the money spent? Did we spend too much money on digital? We didn't spend enough on digital. Did we spend too much on TV? We didn't have a field operations. We should have spent more on banner ads. We should have spent more on walkers or get the vote, right? And that's where a lot of the focus goes. Unfortunately, a lot of the focus does not go on the internal processes of a campaign. And what really drew me to lean campaigns. Lean is a private sector thing done, actually was introduced by Toyota, and then actually there's lean government processes as well. Was this focus on the internal processes of an organization? So in many campaigns, we saw it in the Mitt Romney campaign. We see it in many other campaigns as well, that sometimes the internal processes just take too long. It takes too long to approve an email. It takes too long to approve a tweet. It takes too long to get a commercial done because we're all disagreeing on a message, and every single specific word needs to be in there when you have too many cooks in the kitchen, right?
Right.
So I really wanted to really take a step back. Figure out, of course, how we spend money, where we spend money is extremely important, but that's only one side of the problem. That's only one side of how campaigns work. And really figure out how, internally as a campaign, how can we remove those unnecessary hurdles to make us go faster, right? I mean, you're talking about getting a commercial out there before your opponent gets an attack out, right? Extremely important. You're talking about making sure that we have the right messages on the door-to-door before our opponent starts going door-to-door, right? Mm-hmm. Extremely important. So how can we take a step back, remove those unnecessary hurdles, and make sure that we're doing everything as efficiently as possible? Not just, again, and I can't emphasize this enough, through the campaigns that I've ran, congressional elections, open campaigns, primary campaigns, challenger campaigns, money spent is very important. That allocation, extremely important. But that's only one side of the organization. How many times do you have a huge kitchen cabinet that really restricts the campaign manager or the general consultant on doing their job? And how can we convey to the candidate that, look, this delay in having this democratic process of having everyone have their input is great and all, but it really delays action, and a delay of action is a waste of time in a campaign, and that can cost you, votes. That can cost you either be going on the offense or either going on the defense, and that's just not acceptable.
I think that's something that's overlooked by an incredible number of campaigns, and really in a lot of areas. And given my background and my love of military history, I think about in terms of like the OODA loop. So observe, orient, decide, act. And what they figured out when they started looking in this case at fighter planes and dogfights in the air was that the quicker you could go through that cycle, the more effective you were, the quicker you get lock on your opponent, and the quicker you could destroy them. And there's been lots of studies in the years since that was developed, and really what they found is that's true across the board. This isn't just a fighter jock tactic. This is a strategy for working in campaigns, in politics, and really in business and wherever. And what you're talking about there is that idea of you have to make decisions efficiently, you have to be effective, and you have to get them done on time. Because and this is why one of the things we talk to our coaching clients about is at the very beginning of a campaign, you have to figure out what types of decisions are going to be handled in what ways. I've seen lots of consultants actually pull their hair out when they have a client who is they're trying to have their fingers in every single pie. And as the candidate, there are some decisions that you don't need to worry about. You need to put trust in your people and delegate. And really learning how to delegate if you're not good at it coming into a campaign, you better learn fast because you're going to screw up a lot and you're going to waste your time in a big way. Exactly.
And I think that goes both ways. I think one of the attacks against having so many people to sign off is making sure that that's accurate, that it's correct. But really that speaks to who are you hiring, right? Yes. If you're hiring competent people, then you really don't need to have everyone sign off on what's going on. If you're hiring a competent communications director, you don't need someone to sign off on every tweet. You don't need someone to sign off on every single word of a press release, right? You just need to know and build that relationship up with the candidate, which may take some time, but is extremely important as you refer to trust. Once that trust is there, you hire the right people. And then those competent people can even offer ways to streamline their own processes, right? So if you're hiring a dud, they're just going to take orders and make mistakes and all that good stuff. But if you're hiring a competent staffer, they can also recommend different ways to improve their own processes or even improve other parts of the campaign, which at the end of the day is the most important part. I mean, lean is not just about being effective and efficient. Lean is also about not just being happy or content with yesterday and today, right? What can we do tomorrow to make us better? It's a consistent evaluation of what we're doing. It's great that we were efficient today and tomorrow, but especially on campaigns, as you know, things change. Campaigns develop. Staff fluctuates. Staff come and go. Dynamics come and go. So especially on a campaign, it's extremely important to have a consistent evaluation of what's going on. Is what we did yesterday going to work for today? And if not, how can we fix it? Without that mindset, you're just you're going to be just mundane.
There's actually a book that I read a while back. It's called "It's Your Ship" by Captain Michael Abrashoff. And it kind of fits in very well here because one of the things he did was he very much took the approach of from top down, building a team, allowing them to have some room for initiative, and then taking in their ideas and their insights, letting them try stuff and fail, and in order to find stuff that worked. And it came down to him even talking to the guys about how they painted the ship and how the types of bolts they use and stuff that the captain had no need to worry about. But by talking to his people and letting them have input and letting them take ownership within their operation, he was able to save, in his case, millions of dollars and become one of the top performing ships in the Navy. And as I listened to that, I thought a lot about how the application of the campaign side. And it can manifest itself in a lot of ways, but a lot of it comes down to I think, ego and how much you have to remove that from yourself. And whether you're the consultant or the candidate, you got to make sure you're willing to listen to the junior staffers. On the flip side, as a junior staffer, you got to know that every idea doesn't have to come from you, that you need to be looking for ways to be helpful, but not, this isn't you're not the guy whose name's on the sign. And you taking into account how you're positioning yourself and what you're asking for, making sure you're not asking for too much, but that you're letting them know when good ideas come across. What are some of those things that as you're coaching candidates through this process, how do you approach communicating the need for for adopting this type of campaign strategy when it comes to building efficient, effective systems?
I think a couple things. It's a great question. I think it comes down to trust, and I think you mentioned it, ownership. I think it's the trust of the candidate with the consultant and their staff, right? So if a consultant has the trust of a candidate, the candidate has the trust of the consultant, they should be able to hire staff that it's competent, that they can learn and trust and grow with. But if that doesn't happen, then you have a problem here, because then you have a need for folks to sign off on every press release. You have a need for folks to sign off a tweet or an email or a strategic decision, which doesn't necessarily would require a candidate to sign off on, right? But so it's a long-term goal, and as ownership, if you're a staffer on a campaign, as ownership, like, look, this is my work. I'm not going to have 4 or 5 other people sign off on this. This is going out to the press. This is going out to the media. This is going out to the field staff. If I mess up, that's on me. That's a little bit different from the mindset versus, hey, I'm going to compose this tweet, I'm going to compose this email, I'm going to compose this script, and have 3 or 4 other people change it, because they're going to change it anyway. So I'm not going to be. I'm not. There's no need for me to make it perfect.
Absolutely right.
It's going to be changed anyway, right? So there's 2 different mindsets there. It is, look, you have complete ownership now. You mess up. We're going to have to address it. But if the mindset is, hey, this thing's going to change anyway, why am I going to put my full work into it, right? Why am I going to sweat over every little word? Because at the end of the day, the kitchen cabinet, the consultant, the media consultant, the candidate's spouse, it's going to have something to change with it, right? And it creates this huge bureaucratic process, which holds everything up. And as Republican candidates that I consult for, I mean, there's nothing more that we don't like than a bureaucratic process, right?
Yeah, but yet it seems like everyone adopts that same mindset. That they come at it that's the trap, right? You want to shrink government and cut this bureaucracy, but yet we get trapped into adopting exactly that in our own campaigns.
Agreed, and I think part of it is the upfront conversation you have with the candidate, and a part of it is on the candidate as well. If the candidate is a micromanager, then the candidate, will never not be a micromanager, right? And that's part of the campaign team, the manager, the general consultant, to maybe work with someone else, right, or understand where that's coming from. But if the candidate, says, I've been in business, I've been successful, or I've been in the military, I want to come over and run for office, but I really don't know much about politics. I want to learn from, and I want to hire the right people, right, and trust them. Then that's the most important part right there. So I think when I have my first sit down with potential clients, I like to gauge, the level of micromanagement or can I get this candidate to trust me, right? Can I get this candidate to trust me? And it's going to be a tug and pull, and just because they say they trust you, and just because they bring you on board as a campaign manager or field staffer, doesn't mean that day one it's going to go great, right? You have to kind of earn that trust and build that trust up. And as that trust, and that's part of starting early, right? The earlier you start as a campaign, the earlier you start as a candidate, you can weed out those awkward beginnings. Anytime you start a new job, right? I mean, anytime I've started a new job, there's always this awkward couple weeks of, hey, I just signed on, not exactly sure what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm trying to do this, but he wants me to do that, or So anytime you sign on to a new gig, it's always going to be a little bit of a tug and pull, trying to prove yourself, but also trying to learn at the same time. So that really speaks to the benefit of starting a campaign, earlier as possible, so you can weed out really those not awkward moments, but those moments where you're trying to feel each other out as people. And to be honest with you, as as a manager, as a staffer, you spend so much time with a candidate. At the end of the campaign, you're almost adopted, right? You're almost part of the family,
right?
If done correctly, if done right. And those first couple of weeks is kind of just weeding out the personalities. And as you guys start to click, as guys start to flow, and then the model starts to going forward, and the momentum goes, it should be fine because at that point you know each other and the trust is there.
Now, one of the interesting things I've seen that I'd love your take on is a candidate that comes out of the business sector. They have a successful business of some sort, have worked in corporations, so they have experience delegating. They know how. But yet, when they start as a campaign, they like revert to some like Cro-Magnon level of management expertise. So there's something different about having their name on the front door, having their name out there because they're the candidate now. It's not some business that they may have been in charge of its success, but it's not their business. This is their name, and it's difficult. I find sometimes they're the most difficult to coach out of that micromanagement and let their team actually take ownership because this reversion is so strong. From the candidate's perspective, describe kind of the mindset that they need to have, because I'm sure you've seen the same problem. They're taking expertise out of the business sector. They know how to do it, but yet there's a really emotional pull in their gut that pulls them, that makes them forget about all this stuff. How do you approach dealing with that?
Great question, and it happens all the time. And I really feel for candidates in this situation because, look, you're coming out of the business world. Politics is personal. You're as a business person, you're probably spending some of your own money, right? You're probably self-funding just a tad bit to get started, so you're sacrificing your own money. You're sacrificing your own time with your own family to go politic, right? And then you're putting your name out the line. So you could be attacked, your family could be attacked. And it's as you said, a very emotional experience. And it's kind of the same thing with an operative. An operative who turned to be a candidate is very tough at times because they have their own view. Like if I ever ran for office, do you know how many yard signs I want?
Like thousands.
I get that. I'm not against. I'm very, very against yard signs, and I much rather spend money elsewhere on any other campaign. But I can only imagine if I ran for office one day, I would want all the yard signs possible. I would want to know every little detail going on in the campaign possible. It's just human nature. So I think it's really up to the candidate to hire a consultant, to hire a campaign manager, to hire staffers that they really do trust, that they really do respect, right? If they're hiring a staff or consultant that they think they can manage and micromanage and just have them report to, then that's a problem. So I think as a candidate, you need to hire a consultant that you really do respect, that has the experience with it, where you just say to yourself as a candidate, wow, he won these races, he's done this, he's the guy that everyone has told me to hire, he all this different experience, I need to hire this guy. But that's not it. As you said, you're quickly going to turn back into a micromanager, right? And I think it's on the consultant to build that relationship up with the candidate, to say at times, hey, brass tacks, you need to back up, right? There's two things you need to be doing as a candidate. You need to be fundraising. You need to be shaking hands. I have you. I got you. Here's what we're doing. Here's how we're executing it, and here's what we're going to move forward to. But I need you to fundraise. I need you to shake hands, because if you can't fundraise, I can't do this plan. If you can't win over votes, if you can't talk to voters naturally and be personable, this plan is going to be useless. So I think it's, hiring the right people. I think it's trust, having the brass tacks of a consultant to tell a candidate when to back off in a polite, respectful way, of course. But then I also think it's on the consultant to really, the business folks really like to have a plan. They like to have a business plan. They like to know what their quarterly numbers are. They like to know what their metrics are, their daily goals, right? So for my clients, they get a weekly report. They get a weekly report of here's what our goal was for fundraising, which reminds them of how much they did not fundraise. Here is our goal of doors knocked. Here was our goal of earned media, paid media, voter ID. Here's where we stand with our vote goal, all this good stuff. A whole breakdown of the campaign. And on every Friday, they get a weekly report, like a business report, of where we stood in the past week. And at the very end of it, there's a preview for next week. And here's where we look to achieve next week. So it really gives them a broad overview, something to look at a Friday night to see what happened this past week and where we're looking forward. I find that as long as a lot of these candidates know there is a plan, we're executing on that plan, and here's where we stand on that plan in terms of like hard metrics, then the trust is there. They know what's going on. But if there's no plan, it's kind of organized chaos, and we're just throwing stuff out there, and week by week they don't know where they stand, then that's a problem. I think business folks and a lot of folks like to know where they stand. If they don't know where they stand in terms of metrics, hard data, hard fundraising goals, hard doors knocked, voter IDs, earned media, messages, then they start to worry.
Well, and the reaction when they start to worry is to try to exert more personal control, because they want to manage that more closely, because their assumption, even if lots getting done, if they're not seeing it, if it's not being put in front of them in a way they can quickly digest, then they're not going to, and the results will be there to pull more control. So I think one of the lessons there for staffers especially, but also for consultants, is to be very active about giving them better reports, more frequently than you might be comfortable with. Because, I mean, that takes time, right? I mean, as a consultant, you could take the time building a report to go write another press release, or help get them some more earned media. But there's value, and as much as we want to save time on stuff, there's real value provided in taking the time to do good reporting. And as especially if you're a staffer, I think making sure that your bosses know what you're doing, that you're reporting up the line on what you did, tracking the key performance indicators that they've identified, and maybe even finding some new ones, things that you think are important that they didn't think of to track, and presenting those to those guys. And then making sure that you're coming up with those new ways to improve systems. And when you do that, that does two things. That one helps mitigate that desire to pull more control back from the top and to let you have less autonomy. And two, it builds trust. It actually pushes it in the other direction and enables them to have greater confidence to where, I can say, man, Spencer and his team are rocking it. They're getting so much done. Really, the only place we're underperforming is on the fundraising. That's my fault. So this next week, I'm going to worry less about what Spencer's doing when I'm not talking to him, and why he's not answering my text messages 5 seconds after I send them. And I'm going to focus more on making phone calls.
Exactly, and that's part of it. As those weekly reports go, it allows the staffers and the consultants to really know what KPIs the candidate's going to focus on, right? Each candidate's different. Each thing they care about could be different. One candidate could care more about the Facebook likes or Facebook engagement, right? Another candidate could care more about where we stand with our voter IDs. And so once you start learning that process of what they care about, you can start kind of taking care of that in terms of making sure you focus more on that a little bit more to build that trust, to make sure that they are happy. Once you have a happy candidate, especially if you have a happy candidate spouse, even
yes.
better, helps you gives you a little bit more freedom as a campaign to really tackle the things that are crucial in winning that election.
So we talked a little bit about, so far in the interview, about the efficiency of time and trying to become efficient with our time as far as how we're delegating tasks and building our team and building trust there, and really the implications on both sides, the good and the bad of what that does for you. Let's shift a little bit and talk. I'm sure that there are systems that you encourage every campaign to put in place and that you work with all your clients to build out because of the time they save. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some examples of what you guys do in order to save time there, and why those are important and how they save you time?
Yeah, it really just gets back to just basic good business etiquette. I mean, it really comes back to, I can't tell you how many times I've sit down in a meeting and it was a wasted meeting because the agenda, there might have been no agenda, right?
Right.
And which allows you to, anyone to speak about anything they want. You spend an hour in the meeting, nothing concrete comes from that meeting, right? So any meeting I have, it has to have absolutely a agenda, but not just an agenda that's thrown together 5 minutes before the meeting. The agenda was thrown out a day before. The candidates looked at it. The staff has looked at it. We've tweaked it. We've all come prepared for this one single meeting. And we all have our own talking points. We all have our own action items, which really helps keep those meetings on goal, on focus. It kills me to see the meetings in any world, the campaign world, the business world, where they just go on their own tangent. They chase rabbit holes, right? And so one of the things we put in place is look, if you're going to have a meeting, it's got to have a purpose. There has to be an agenda, and that agenda has to be flushed out. They can't just be something you put together 5 minutes before I sit down with you, because I'm not prepared, you're not prepared, the candidate's not prepared. So let's really make sure that our meetings are as effective and efficient as possible. And once those meetings are done, what are the follow-up items? And let's chase down those follow-up items for the next meeting, whether it's next week or tomorrow or a couple days from now. The amount of time wasted in campaign meetings talking about strategy or messages or they're doing this or opposition research, and I heard this about the candidate. What do you think about this, right? Well, that's not credible resources. Come on, let's be honest here. The amount of time wasted there just kills me, and so I try to implement as much as just basic good quality business practices as much as possible into the campaign world. You might have heard, and I'm sure you have, campaigns are organized chaos. To some extent they are, and I get that, but they don't have to be all the time. If you have a good business setup, you have job descriptions, you have meeting agendas, you have quarterly meetings, quarterly goals, daily goals, monthly goals to hit. All that stuff kind of goes away, and everyone's focused. You're not focused on what tweet came out. You're not focused on what attack email or attack press release came out against your campaign. You're focused on hitting your hard numbers. I need to knock on 400 doors today, right? I need to get X amount of percentage of engagement on social media today. I need to hit whatever our fundraising goal is today. It really keeps you focused, driven, and hyper-focused on the job and what needs to get done.
I think you're 100% right. I see so many people getting distracted by those very variables. And when it comes down to it, most of the campaign comes down to raise enough money and talking to enough voters, having enough positive conversations. And if you identify the right KPIs, if you've hired a good team and you run your campaign team efficiently, you're not wasting time on stuff like purposeless meetings, then you're going to improve your chances a lot. One of the things that I've in both my research as well as how I build coaching is I find that the pre-work, really before the campaign gets in full swing, that has big implications throughout the rest of the cycle as far as how efficient you're able to be with your time and how prepared you are to run it like a business. What are some of the things that you encourage your clients to do before things really get started, whether it's before announcement or just before you get in full swing, to prepare to make sure that chaos never fully takes hold?
Yeah, there's a saying that there's never too early to plan, but you can announce too early. I think one of the more important things is having the family on board, having the spouse on board, making sure that you have their full support and what that actually means to them and what they're willing to help out with. But also just having your finances. If you have liens against you, if you have any financial stuff against you, let's get that figured out and let's be serious about it. What's your time commitment? A lot of people say, I've talked to my boss, and they understand I'm going to run for office, and so I have flexibility there. But really, what is your time commitment? Because let's be honest here, during the week, you need to fundraise, you need to knock on doors. If you're not running for Congress, right? If you're running for Congress, you can probably just fundraise the most part and then do events. But if you're running for state senate, state legislative, county judge, whatever you want to call it, dog catcher, you have two folds here. You have fundraising, you have knocking on doors. And if you're knocking on doors from 3 to 6 or 3 to 7 every day, Monday through Friday, that's a considerable amount of hours. And when you're not doing that, you need to be fundraising. So really, how much time can you commit to the campaign? How much time can you commit to fundraising, to knocking on doors? And let's map it out. Can your schedule actually fit this in? Does your boss clearly understand how much time you need to be away from the office, especially in the final weeks and months of that campaign? But also, I think one of the aspects I like to draw here is in the thick of the campaign, when you're towards the end and when you're convinced that if you only had $10,000 more dollars, if you only had $15,000 more dollars, you could win this, right? As a candidate, where do you draw that line? Because let's be honest here, at the end of after Tuesday, your life moves on. You have a family. You have probably kids going to college. You have college debt. You have a mortgage. You have all this good stuff, right? So we're early on. Let's have this conversation before the emotion comes into play. And financially, if you're contributing to your campaign, where's your red line? Because I don't want to cross a red line. as much as I want you to win, as much as I am going to tell you more money is going to help you win, I don't want to leave you ruined. I don't want to leave you in debt of $50,000, right? So let's have those important, crucial conversations now before the campaign gets started, before the emotions fly, the attacks fly back and forth, and have it kind of an agreement. Once we get here, I can't do this anymore.
I love every one of those. We actually just released as one of the free downloads on mycampaigncoach.com. We actually released a list of about 30 questions that we encourage folks to work through before they run for office. And as part of that, that preparatory and exploratory phase, and every single one of those is on there. So we're clicking. I'm 100% on board.
Awesome.
Now, looking beyond we talked about the time efficiency side pretty heavy, from the how you build your team and how you run your operations to what you're looking at beforehand, and kind of some of those major questions and systems that you got to work through before you announce and right there in the early stages. Let's talk a little about the ground game side, because that's something you're obviously a big fan of. You're talking about knocking on doors. When you're looking at a ground game, how do you approach that?
It comes down to in a world where we are becoming so much more disconnected from each other. We're always online. We're always on our phone. A door knock at our door is very rare, right? So, just that personal connection, that personal relationship, a personal conversation, especially with a down ballot candidate, with a swing voter, or even a voter who tends to vote opposite from your own party, can very easily vote for you just because you talk to them. Just very easily vote for you because you had that conversation. So one of the problems I've faced recently is there's not many more volunteers left. Everyone, we've started paying people to knock doors, right? Campaigns have started paying high school and college kids to knock doors. So especially at the very beginning, you have to have a healthy sum allocated if you want a healthy field operation to pay folks. And there's pros and cons there, right? There's pros of paying folks on the campaign, because once you pay them on the campaign, you kind of own them, right? There's no, he or she's only a volunteer. They did this for a couple hours and left. No, I'm paying you X amount of dollars per hour. I own you until whenever the contract ends, which is nice. The con, obviously, is that you're paying folks,
right,
and not using free labor. So in the beginning, you have to have a healthy sum of budget, in your field line item to pay folks, college or high school kids, to get that job done. But also, if I can't tell you how many people still think using paper is acceptable in terms of going door to door. I can't tell you. And one of the things I do is I work for a nonprofit that sends me around and teaches campaigns and all that good stuff. And it's the app. We have to use the app. The app allows us. It's free for most folks. A GOP data center, Bridgetree, i360, whatever you want to use. It allows us to not only track. There's accountability, transparency, and it makes us easier to track our metrics. Accountability in the fact that, look, we know where you are. So if I'm paying you as a high school kid or a college kid, I know that you're going to go knock on doors and not sit down at the local Chili's and fill out a couple doors, right? I can track you on your phone. That there's transparency in the fact of how many doors you're knocking. If you're only knocking 10 doors, but you've been out there for 3 hours, that's a problem, right? Transparency on the candidate. So if the candidate has only knocked 5 doors or so, because we all know how much candidates love going door to door, very sarcastically there, I can hold you accountable. But also the campaign can hold the field staff, the campaign manager accountable for how many doors they've knocked or haven't knocked. And then it makes it far easier to track the metrics of, have we hit our doors today? If we haven't hit our doors today, it's noon, we have a couple hours left. How can we reallocate resources, our field staff, to make sure that we hit those goals, right? It's just, to me, it's mind-boggling how many people still think that going door-to-door with paper is acceptable.
Well, and not only does it not make you efficient when it comes to the deployment side and the tracking side, but the dirty secret about that paper is it never gets entered. You can't do anything with it.
And think about the wasted resources that one person who always has to enter it back in. That's a crucial couple hours of every day where that one person could be making phone calls to voters, could be going door to door with voters. And you're right. How many times does a volunteer come to the office, go knock doors for a couple hours, then have to go pick up Jimmy from soccer practice, right? They go pick up Jimmy from soccer practice, then they have to go home to make dinner, and that paper never gets back. It just doesn't.
It's distributed across your district. It never gets entered, and you're never able to follow up on it. And so actually one of the other hats that I wear is working with Campaign Sidekick, which is an app that provides your ability to target your voters and talk to them and have all that back in. It's an app that does that. And some of the things that we're a big fan of, in addition to what you talked about, from the tracking, from being able to efficiently cut those walk lists and deploy them, for being able to have multiple surveys and being able to have all that data back in real time. The idea is that when you're going door to door, the leave behind of that positive impression is a real huge part of the interaction. But you also want to bring something back with you. You got to bring it back knowledge about that voter, about what they care about, content information, notes, because this should not be your only contact with the voter, right? You want to have a couple different types of contact with them, that ideally a couple that are live. And so if you're not logging that information, that's not going to help with retargeting, with sending them a follow-up note, talking about how much you enjoyed talking about Jimmy and how he rocked his soccer game this Saturday, or whatever it was. You're missing out about the added benefit of those follow-up contacts, which are huge.
Yeah, can't agree more. It's one of those things where, and talking about when the notes do get back to the headquarters, as they often don't, trying to read someone's handwriting, right? I mean, come on.
So bad.
How often have we looked over those barcodes and the bubble sheets and what was this guy saying? What was this volunteer trying communicate here? With the notes in the app, it's all just text. It allows you to really extrapolate how the notes are going, allows you to really very quickly respond or pull the data as need be. It just, the app allows you to be incredibly more effective and incredibly more efficient.
There's no doubt about it. Now moving on to the money side. So obviously running lean campaigns, I think money's what a lot of people's first mind goes to, but you're very correct in looking at the efficiency of time first. But obviously treasure has a very, very important impact. It's a finite resource that people got to work hard to get, as well as to fundraise and get out of their pockets into the campaign coffers. When you're looking at campaigns from that perspective, talking about the treasure side, what are some of the biggest things you look at that campaigns waste money on, or that you want to help them save money with?
Well, I'm going to do the very stereotypical classic yard signs.
Yes.
Would be my number one, but I'm going to skip over that. And I think one of the ways that I overcome that, right, is, look, I understand yard signs don't vote, and I understand that we are going to need to have yard signs to have some sense of credibility, right? Here is our line item for yard signs. Here's the expense. We're not going to go above this expense, whether it be $500 or $1,000. And once we hit that mark, we're done. And then once you sign off on that, we've signed off on it. It's a budget. That's part of having a budget, right? Especially for business folks is here's the budget back in November, in January. We don't want to make these last minute emotional decisions to change the budget in October, right? Another aspect of this, how do you fundraise your money? One of the things that a lot of folks like to complain about is, sometimes call time isn't fun. Call time to fundraise can be awkward. Call time to fundraise takes a lot of emotional and mental energy away from the candidate, and I get that. So they like to do direct mail fundraising, which, guess what? Direct mail fundraising is great if you're an incumbent. It's great if you have a large house file. It's great if you have that time and flexibility to put that money up front. But unfortunately, with challenger campaigns, with people just getting started who don't know you, direct mail fundraising can cost you a lot of money just to get the pieces out there. And then if you return even, that's a great piece, right? I mean, with the direct mail fundraising, it's all about increasing your house file. So one of the things I struggle against is the new candidate who goes, what about those direct mail fundraising pieces? And we talked about doing those, and we need to do those. You go, well, we'll do one or two to the solid Republicans or solid partisan voters, but the amount of time it takes to create a effective direct fundraising piece, the amount of money, and the return on the investment is very low for a one-off challenger campaign. Once you get elected, let's talk about a sustained approach to your house file, to your prospect file, and let's see how we can grow that over the years. But as a challenger campaign, I'm not going to spend, $100,000 to raise $102,000, right? It just doesn't make much sense.
So let's talk more specifically about what you guys do. So what does Lean Campaign Strategies do for candidates? What do you do to help them? And how can you help our listeners or other folks go out there and win their campaigns?
Yeah, so we are a general consultant firm. We consult on races from U.S. Congress, House reps, all the way down to targeted state legislative races. We have county judge races in Texas. We have clients in California. We have clients up in the Northeast. No race is too big or too small. When it comes down to is we just love helping out good candidates. We love helping good clients, good people get elected. I think it really comes down to where we're in a time right now in this country where we just need genuine good people to get elected.
Absolutely.
If you're genuine, you're good, you have a good heart, and you have a good system down. We want to help. You may not be able to pay us right off the bat, but look, 6 months, 7 months down the road, we want to be there for you.
I tell people all the time that we're here to help good people get elected to do great things. And it's always good to meet people like yourself and to get to build those relationships with people that see campaigns the same way and have the same motivations. And so I'm excited to make a friend out of this interview, but I'm also excited by the information that you've got to share. I think if our listeners will apply some of those lessons from approaching the efficiency of their internal operations to putting their focus on fundraising. These are lessons that are going to save you guys a ton of time, a ton of money, and increase your odds of getting elected a great degree. And I desperately hope folks will take advantage of that. I know they will, because I've got messages from other listeners that listen to other episodes and about how they're applying the lessons they learn here. And that's why we do the podcast. That's why you do what you do, is ultimately to help good people get elected and do great things. Where can folks find you online?
Yeah, so our website is leancampaignstrategies.com. My Twitter is Spencer Sullivan. That's my Twitter handle. Either from email, Twitter, or Facebook. Very responsive. If you have any questions, if you're interested in what we're doing, you want to know more information, feel free to reach out. My email is also spencer.sullivan@leancampaignstrategies.com.
Yeah, if you go to leancampaignstrategies.com, Spencer's got his email address and other content information right on there. Easy to follow through. And, of course, we'll have all the links to his content information and probably some of his other interviews on the show notes and here on the website blog. Spencer, you got any final thoughts or final closing wisdom to share with the audience?
One of my biggest pet peeves is, and it gets back down to real contact, is there's a big difference between talking to the voters and talking to the people, right? I love the campaigns who go out and say, we shook 1,000 hands, we did the parade, we did the events, but really, how many voters in your district, in your election, who are persuadable for your candidacy did you shake? And I don't know about that. Let's face it, right? There's a ton of people in your district. Not a lot of those are registered. Those who are registered, not every registered votes, right?
Right.
And those who vote, do they vote in this specific election that you're running for? And if they are registered, they do vote in that specific election. Are they even persuadable? Are they a hard Democrat or they're hard Republican? And at that point, you're like, wow, I wasted a lot of time shaking hands with people who don't even remember who I am. So always decipher if you're talking to voters or if you're talking to people. Last things last, Ross, thanks for having me on. This has been great. I think what you guys do there is amazing, and looking forward to having a friend and many more conversations.
Absolutely, Spencer. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Guys, we'll have all of his content information in the show notes and on the blog. I hope you guys take advantage of reaching out. He loves meeting new folks and helping good candidates. Also, go to mycampaigncoach.com. If you haven't signed up for our email list, we'd appreciate it if you check it out. We'll be sending you great content every week. And make sure you check out the Advanced Candidate course as well. I think that's a tool that you, as you're getting ready to run your campaign, you'll be able to go through that process, learn a lot, and be ready to go get your general consultants and get your campaign team put together and rock and roll. So we'll talk to you guys again next week.
Please subscribe and rate us on iTunes to help spread the word. We'll be back with you next week with more campaign insights from My Campaign Coach.